When Mac made it very clear that he didn't want to be on the show anymore for the fourth year and the fifth year, and we said, okay, we'll adjust. Um, which, in a sense, was another, I think, emblematic of a simpler time. It, Fox and I think CBS were well within their rights to say, no, you're staying. Otherwise we have a law action here, which in fact happened when Wayne Rogers left. There was, a lot of legal papers. There were a lot of legal papers flying back and forth that never came to anything. But when that happened, Gene and I thought that we should use the departure of the character in some meaningful fashion. And M.A.S.H was not about everybody having a good time. M.A.S.H was not about happy endings. And we decided that his character could, not should, but could die. The expression Abyssinia, Henry, comes from a flapper era, 20s era expression for Abyssinia, meaning I'll be seeing you. Kind of corny, but then Henry Blake was kind of corny. We thought it was perfectly in keeping, in character with the character. We assigned the script to a writing team who'd done a lot of work for M.A.S.H and continue to. Jim Fritzell and Everett Greenbaum. We told them what we wanted. We wanted it to be essentially a goodbye episode in which people shared their feelings. No big tension, no big storyline. And we said we wanted him to die at the end. And we swore them to secrecy. Everybody, the only people who knew about it were Burt Metcalf, Gene, and I, and the writers. And when they brought the episode in, we detached that page and did not distribute it. And we rehearsed the episode. We shot the episode. I did something. I directed it, as it turned out. It was my turn in the box. And I did the one sort of directorial touch I've ever done in my life that no one ever notices, but was just a kind of a pleasure for me to do. Whenever Henry was seen in his office, there was always a skeleton behind him, as though it foretold what might happen to the character without tipping it, without giving it away. The reason we kept it a secret was our primary reason was to keep the actors from being influenced by that information. If they started to film the show knowing that Henry was a dead man by the end of the episode, their performances would have been quite different. It would have colored their performances. Good as they are, you can't help it, because they would have been dealing with their emotions as people, as co-workers of McLean Stevenson. It was an effect we devoutly desired not to have. So we shot every scene in that episode, and we were at the point where normally you say it's a wrap. It would have been a wrap for the show and a wrap for that season, the third season. But I asked everybody to just wait 1 minute, and I said, could you just relight the OR, the operating room? And they went about doing that. And Gene and I took the cast over to one side, sat them down and said, look, we're going to do something that you don't know about. I should say that we did tell Alan all that we were going to do this. By that time, it was pretty well established that Alan was the star of the show, and it just seemed right that he know about this. And so I had this manila envelope with the last page in it that they'd never seen, and I started to open it, and Gary said, don't. Gary Berghoff said, I know what's in there. It's pictures of dead babies. I said, no, there are no dead babies in there. I wouldn't do that to anybody. And I gave them each a copy, and they looked at it, and they were really, it's not often in your life that you see people stunned, and they really could not believe what was on the page. And Larry Linville said, fucking brilliant. I'll give you a clean version. Larry Linville said, brilliant. And Gary Berghoff looked at McLean Stevens and said, you'll probably win the Emmy. Gary Berghoff looked at McLean Stevens and he said, you'll probably win the Emmy for this, you son of a bitch. McLean didn't say anything. Just sort of, it really threw him. Anyway, with that, we went back into the set. There were about a couple hundred people easily on the stage because it was our last show of the season, and that always attracted a crowd, some press, some family, lots of family. And I said to Bill Jurgensen, who was our camera director, I said, this is what we're going to do. So it's set up for this. It was described that the OR is in progress. We pan to the doors. Gary Berghoff comes in. He's got a telegram in his hand, and he reads the message about Henry Blake's plane going down on the Sea of Japan. Spun into the Sea of Japan. There weren't no survivors. And he said, okay. Nobody watching, none of the crew, none of the extras, no one knew what was coming. And so everybody took their places. And I said, action. And Gary came through and did this incredible, beautiful, heartbreaking, not maudlin, just right on reading of the line. Then we panned over to the doctors who just kept operating. Couldn't look at each other, just had to work. And I said, cut. And BJ, the camera guy, came over and said, we have to do it again. In the meantime, the reaction of the people there was, and I said, what happened? He said, we didn't get this. There was a shadow here. The inevitable gremlins that creep in at the best moments. And I thought, Gary will never, ever be this good again. And I walked him around in the back to his starting spot, and I said, okay. And this is why Gary was so brilliant. Second time, acting, but acting from a real emotion, acting from how he really felt, he was able to do it just as brilliantly because he meant what he was saying. It's not as though he had to get up for that part. He had to sum up how he felt about McLean leaving. And it was a death in the show family. So action, and he came through, and he did the line, and we panned. And as we panned, a scalpel dropped, quite by accident, unplanned. And it was perfect because it pierced the silence, no pun intended. And it sort of reminded everybody what these people were about. These were people who used these sharp things to do things to people who had been hit by other sharp things. And we went to Wayne and Alan, and they sort of looked at each other, just their eyes, they were masked, they were operating, and then they went back to the work, just work, and then we said cut, and that was it. Wayne, McLean was so touched that he went to his dressing room. I didn't know it, but he cried for about 2 hours. He was just so, it's as though we did kill him, and that was not the intended effect. We had a wrap party. We had food, we had this, we had that. He didn't come to the party. And of course, we talked a lot about what we had just done. We had a hard time convincing CBS and 20th Century Fox that we could do it. We put that into the tag. I spoke earlier about this postscript. Usually we didn't put important scenes in the tag because they could always be cut out in syndication and you'd never see them again, But this one we saved so that if anybody felt it was too much or they didn't want to do it, they had the option. But I think it was a very grown-up thing to do and a very sensible thing to do. We had hundreds of letters from viewers saying, you tricked us, you sucked us in, we thought this was a comedy show, how dare you toy with our feelings. All those letters are in the Smithsonian Institute. And I'm very proud of that show.
You and Gene responded.
We responded. We wrote literally hundreds of letters, and not to blow our horns too loudly, we handwrote each letter because we wanted to show that we cared enough about what they cared about, not to send them a form letter. And we said why we did it, and we pointed out that same week that this fictional character died in Korea, a plane load of Vietnamese children taking off from Saigon to come to America had crashed, and they all perished. And I said, I couched it, but the idea was, I hope you felt the same way about them as you did somebody who really doesn't exist.